paper.
Yeah, I'm not on the committee.
You're not on any.
I am.
Starting to rain.
Yeah,
Where's Carl?
He,
that within the hall?
he's
Oh.
coming.
Oh, okay.
early retirement.
We'll continue our meeting now. We just re-entered public session after an executive session to discuss collective bargaining for both administrators and for our teachers. At this time, look for public input. Seeing no one to be heard, we'll move to student report, and tonight we have Josh and Torcio.
The senior trip was over last weekend. They left Saturday and got back late last night. They said they had great weather and it was a lot of fun. Over the weekend there was also RILA, which 5 students went to. Kristen Shevlin, Brian Smith, Isha Jane, Elise Mikowski, and Jenna Crawford, excuse me. They went to Camp Rotary up in Boxford, and they said they had a great time. Senior exams begin next week. For track news, there was Cals over the weekend. The girls came in 7th. I don't know how the boys did. And then there's the Division 4 state meet down at North Reading's track on Saturday. I believe it begins at 9:30. The music department put on the variety show last Wednesday. I think that went pretty well. Student recognition night is tomorrow night at 6:30 in the auditorium. Thursday is the band show, end of the year performances. Next week, class officer elections will begin. The voting for that. Speeches are on Tuesday and the voting will be on Thursday. National Honor Society had the induction last Thursday. We had about 40 students, I believe.
42.
42, there you go. Get inducted. Lacrosse, boys were away at Malden and the girls were home. The boys are 17-1 on the season, so they're having a pretty good season. And Relay for Life was last Friday. There was a big turnout and their weather was pretty good this year. So. We have 4 teams going to the state tournament as of so far. Boys lacrosse, softball, baseball, and boys tennis. And my student work.
Thank you, Josh.
And as Josh was passing that out, I want you to know that he was inducted into the National Honor.
Congratulations.
Thank you. What's going around is an essay I did for my AP English language class. We read a piece by Walter Lippmann called The Indispensable Opposition. We just had to discuss the rhetoric he used and how he successfully employed a counter argument, and I went in depth about I cited specific paragraphs on how he used the counter argument and his rhetorical effectiveness, and pretty much it.
I try to use the I try to be rhetorically effective in most of the meetings here. I know Mr. Venezia also.
Keep trying.
Total failures. Total failures. We still care about them, though.
I know, it's a big fail.
This is great.
Thanks, Josh. Any questions?
Thank you,
More
Josh.
weeks of school, right?
Yeah,
Almost done.
down the
June
days.
15th.
I know. It's almost there.
Yeah, we have Josh mentioned 4 teams going to the States, and the baseball, boys lacrosse, and softball are having phenomenal seasons. They've only lost 6 games between the 3
It's
teams.
going to be interesting to follow them because I think they all have a legitimate shot at going very,
Going
very
pretty deep.
deep into their tournaments.
Right.
Which would be great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy to go all the way, that's for sure, but this is the year that they could do it.
Thanks, Josh.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Good night, Josh.
Next, we'll move to continued business, and we have an MSBA SSBC update.
Yes, the SSBC has not met since the last school committee meeting, but I would like to report that tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on on May 22nd, I wrote 8, that was strange. On May 22nd, the town boards and department heads will come together with the OPM, with the architect Doran Whittier, and with our CM at Risk from Gilbane to have a meeting, and I will be attending. It will be held at Town Hall in Room 5. This is the second meeting of this sort, and it's an opportunity to provide an update to all the department boards and the department heads, and to ask them if they have any questions or concerns about where we are in the project. So that will be taking place tomorrow. Cliff, is there anything else that we should report under the SSB at this particular
Can't
time?
think of anything. We're moving ahead on all fronts for the move of the modulars. That seems to be moving along just as nicely as you could ask for. I think that they're going to begin work on June 16th, although they may or not, may be a couple days after that they actually do something. But the date is the 16th. All of that seems to be pretty well coordinated from my observation, right on top of it.
The SSBC meetings now will be held on the last Tuesday of every month. And now that we've moved into this phase of the project, and all of the organizations, the CM at Risk and the OPM and the architect have weekly meetings, and those weekly meetings are currently being held in the superintendent's conference room. But those will move to the construction trailers once those are put into place at the back of the middle school. So right now, those are taking place weekly. Cliff does attend, and I believe the last one was held last week
Yes, on Thursday.
on Thursday. And lots of the conversation, as Cliff just mentioned, is about moving the modulars. Gilbane has contracted with a moving company who will be meeting with the middle school principal and the teachers to talk about how to facilitate that move out of the current modulars and then back into the modulars when they're relocated in August. And the next SSBC meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, May 29th, beginning at 6:30 p.m. in the high school modular cafeteria.
Thank you. Any questions? I have one. It might be more for Carl, even though Carl won't be around when this happens. Do you know, will the plan be to attempt to sell the modulars that we have when the new buildings are completed?
I can offer a suggestion and an opinion. Absolutely, the answer should be yes. And I wouldn't say just the modulars. There's probably other assets that the school department owns that can be offered. One of the assets that come to mind are the HVAC units that are on top of the modulars. Those have value. And I think it's not uncommon for school departments to operate some kind of, I don't want to call it an auction, but some kind of opportunity whereby you list all of the assets and you suggest that other school departments or municipalities come in and take a look. And you tend to do it at their expense. In other words, you can spend so much money for this HVAC unit if you're willing to remove it and cart it away. That's legally under the auspices of the chief procurement officer of the town, who in this case is town administrator, Mr. Balukonis. But yes, I think there's opportunity for them to do that.
And what about something here like the middle school boiler? I don't know how old that is. Is that another thing? It's maybe 4 or 5 years old, or?
It has to be looked at. That one will be a little bit challenging because the stairwell, it was so small that
I
had
remember.
to be installed in pieces.
Yeah,
They
I remember
literally
that.
put it together with hundreds of pieces. So
Right.
there may be some issues with that.
Have to blast to get it
Yeah,
out of there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cal's raised this before, actually, and I think it's should be on the agenda, and it may be on the agenda of the secondary school building committee, but Cal had raised not only, as Mel suggested, the modulars, but a lot of other equipment and things that in the old buildings that might be, have some value, might be worth some money, so.
And would that money have to go toward the project, or would it be money that would come into the town? I assume it would come into the town,
I
right?
believe
Since-
so.
Yeah, okay, but still, anything we can salvage and
Absolutely.
make some money on, I think makes sense.
It's a complicated process because the FF&E process has to unfold, so the determination of what furniture is going to be purchased and what isn't. So
Exactly.
there's an inventory that would have to take place first, because there may be furnishings as well.
Great. Any further questions?
FF&E.
Okay, great. Next, we have a fiscal year 13 budget update.
Yes. Carl will take over from me in one moment, but last Wednesday, May 16th, the Senate Ways and Means Committee released their budget recommendations for FY13. And incredibly, they increased Chapter 78 over both the governor's recommendation and the House of Representatives. They also increased Circuit Breaker to be, and recommended that it be fully funded. You remember when Circuit Breaker was first legislated, it indicated that cities and towns would be, or I should say school districts, would be reimbursed up to 75% of extraordinary costs that were identified as 4 times the average cost of educating a special education student. And we have found that the threshold is about $38,000. So when costs to educate students, special education students, exceed $38,000, the difference between the cost and the $38,000 is reimbursed at a percentage rate. This particular year, that reimbursement rate was about 60%.
Yes, please, so.
And what is on the table right now that is recommended by the Senate Ways and Means is to fully fund that at 75% reimbursement. That's incredible. It hasn't happened yet since legislation was passed. So if it does happen for next year, that will be extraordinary. So I asked Carl to take a look at if the numbers still held that came out last Wednesday, and what does that mean for the town of North Reading. I gave you a little bit of a glimpse, but I wanted Carl to double check and go back and take a look. So.
Sure, thank you, Kathy. As we know, the process of the state budget still has 2 stages to go through prior to the virtual allocation. Those 2 stages are that first, the Senate Ways and Means Committee meet with the House Ways and Means Committee. That's called the Conference Committee. Those 2 parties get together to make final recommendations to their 2 bodies. So that's the first stage that has to take place, and changes can take place at that point. And then lastly, the General Court sends, of course, a recommendation to the governor, who can also make changes. So there are 2 stages to go. Having said that, there's a fair amount of confidence that the Senate Ways and Means numbers that Kathy just alluded to will stick. Now, if that happens, presently, these additional dollars that would be made available to North Reading would not be made available to our respective budgets, because only the town meeting can appropriate funds to budgets. So unless there is an amendment on the floor of town meeting in June, or in some cases October, it has happened as late as October that we've made additional appropriations. So unless that happens, these will be funds that will be in a free cash state for the town of North Reading. The numbers have not changed since last Wednesday. To my knowledge, I checked as recently as this afternoon. So those are the numbers that we see. As to Circuit Breaker, we won't know the exact appropriation that North Reading could potentially yield until a couple more things happen. First, the PPS office has to put together what, for the lack of a better term, an inventory of all of the students' costs this year, and then they make determinations for what the costs were over the threshold of $38,000. They're underway doing that now. That becomes the baseline for which we get 75%. So we won't know the exact number for several months. Suffice to say, if it's fully funded at 75%, the yield to North Reading, which does not need to be appropriated, by the way, it's a direct allocation, could be as high as $50,000. So if that happens, that would provide a lot of comfort level for an account that often has a lot of volatility.
We probably shouldn't tell a selectman or anybody about this.
No.
So right now it looks
I'm
like
guessing
this.
they might know.
I think you
but-
just told the
Yeah,
town.
no.
Right now, it looks like there's an increase of $102,840 in Chapter 70 that could come back to the town, and an increase of $110,291 in unrestricted aid that could also come back to the town. That would be a very good thing if it did.
Any
Excellent.
questions,
That'll be a
comments?
Big help.
Yes. And I
Hold
know
your
that
breath.
there's been
Hold
some
your breath.
discussion too about, I know about the selectmen about, and from the finance committee about at some point trying to find more money for the stabilization fund. And there's also, the